I never know exactly when we're going live. Oh, okay, I think it's now. So welcome everybody. Welcome to this roundtable talk. We haven't done a roundtable talk for a while. It's been a really difficult few weeks for me personally. And this is like a really difficult subject to talk about. So I'm so glad you're with me. We're going to be talking about misogyny tonight and femicide. There's been a lot happening. There's been a lot happening that's very triggering for all women in the community, and also women of colour. And we're going to be speaking however we feel about like what's going on right now. So if you haven't met me before, my name is Hester, and I'm from the Trust the People project, which is about community building, community democracy, and actually being the future that we wish for, because it's not coming from the government. It's with us. The responsibility is with us in our communities. And I'm going to pass over to Charlotte next. Is that all right?
Hello everyone, my name is Charlotte. Nice to see you all this evening. I am a vegan hair and skincare specialist. I am also a fitness coach, and I love to talk. So on that note, I'm going to hand you over to Martin.
Unmute for us, Martin.
Are we making an introduction, are we? Is that what we're doing? Yeah, my name's Martin. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, discussing this very current issue that seems to be very much at the fore now, but I think it's a long-term or long-time issue that I think has many different strands to it, and it's not simple at all by any stretch of the imagination. So I think this evening we're going to probably deconstruct it and really examine it from different perspectives, which would be very, very interesting. But yeah, thanks for allowing me to be part of the event and the discussion.
Do you want to pass to Leela?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Leela Fortunato. I'm a teacher, and I also run Black British Studies, which gives lessons on Black British history for adults and children, and I do webinars as well. I'm also a volunteer director of Bannister House Solar, which again is something to do with the environment that intersects very much with communities that are disadvantaged, like Black and Asian communities. I'll hand over to Dupe.
Hello everybody, good evening. My name is Dupe. I've worked in the public sector for over 20 years. Prior to that, I've got experience as well working in the legal sector with asylum seekers. I'm a mum of three, 2 girls and 1 boy. And, I think, lots of the, the last 2 weeks have been quite, I don't know, I can't think of the right word, but I found them quite emotional. And I hope that, we can use this opportunity, this moment to sort of think about where we want to go to, and how we all, men, women, different communities can come together and build a better future for our young people.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for giving your time this evening. So I'm going to just share this, which is actually from Wikipedia. It's a misogyny definition. Misogyny is the hatred of or contempt for or prejudice against women or girls. And it enforces sexism by punishing those who reject an inferior status for women and rewarding those who accept it. Misogyny manifests in numerous ways, which includes social exclusion, sex discrimination, hostility, patriarchy, male privilege, belittling of women, disenfranchisement of women, violence against women, and sexual objectification. And it's existed throughout history. And it was noted as a disease in classical Greece. Misogyny can be found within sacred texts of religions, mythologies, Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy, and many misogynistic ideas have also been documented through the work of different Western thinkers, including Aristotle. So it can lead to both physical and psychological violence. And physical violence includes misogynistic terrorism and domestic violence, as well as there's this relationship between misogyny and white supremacy. And then it goes on to say how misogyny on the internet has increased over time. It doesn't say anything about this, but I think access to pornography on the internet has also got a part in all of this. And yeah, sometimes there's coordinated attacks through the internet, misogynistic attacks, and yeah, there's a lot more. I think that's probably enough. I think that's enough to get started with. I brought up in a meeting earlier this week, in a team meeting, actually with trusted people, that I really wanted to find circles to talk about what's happening. And just me saying the word misogyny and femicide, it changed the women who were there in the room. It's suddenly like, oh my God, she said it. And they got very emotional and they started crying. And one of the women in my team was at Sarah Everard's vigil on Saturday because she lives locally. And they're all a similar age and blah, blah, blah. But I said, I would really like there to be some community circles initiated around this. And one of the women that got particularly upset said, my job is to talk about oppression, anti-oppression, but we never talk about the oppression of women. It's just not in our courses. It's just not. And afterwards, we stayed on together for a while, and we've scheduled a conversation for Sunday where we can just like try and get some of the stuff out. So it like, I think what was happening to me in that moment was I was just remembering that growing up, and I said this to Charlotte earlier, I learned that if you're a woman, to be a woman or a girl, you're supposed to look attractive, be an attractive object for a male gaze, but it's your fault if you're too attractive because you don't want to get too much attention. And if you get too much attention, you'll be hated by other girls. You'll also be blamed for male attention. And if anything ever happens to you, like you get attacked, it's your fault. So I'm just going to leave that there. That's my first response.
I was having a similar conversation with a friend of mine who's a woman, and we were talking about the imagery that you see in the media that is sexually exploiting women in relation to the way they're being portrayed, you know, the way that they may be dressed in a certain program. She's Italian, and she was giving the example that on, I think it's Rai TV, which is like their national TV, late night especially, you'd have these programs where these women were very scantily clad in terms of hardly wearing anything. And it was very much as though they were being exploited just to kind of titillate the audience. And some of the women were actually, they didn't say anything or hardly say anything. They were just smiling as though it was okay to be actually be mistreated in that way. And we were talking about how that's a portrayal, but also why that portrayal is something that taps into something that is actually primitive and natural within a man, in terms of what he's looking at. So those images are very much developed because they know the psychology of who's watching it is that they want you to believe that that woman is basically nothing. There's a nothingness there. So it's almost like nature and nurture coming together in order to have these kind of very two-dimensional kind of ideas about women. So I think there's a real problem with the owners of certain media corporations who want to almost dumb down men first and foremost, based on what they're looking at, but also dumbing down women that believe possibly that they need to actually portray themselves in that way too. So I think there's something about the system and who's in control of it, and why possibly it divides male and females to come together, we should be coming together to force a real change, a revolutionary change. But these images cause us to be apart. And I think that's a major factor. I read another thing. I was reading this post by this woman on Facebook, and I think she works with women who have been abused in domestic situations or into social situations. And she was stating that we need to nurture young men in a more loving way, to give them a sense of they need to reflect more deeply on who they are and what those images actually mean for their psyche. And it's a hard thing to break, I think, those ideas that are constantly coming towards you if you're not willing to sit down and think, what does that mean for me? So yeah, I think there's a lot in terms of the male psyche, because I think naturally you could argue that there's an attraction to females, but then there's a way of expressing it, isn't there, which needs to be kind of thought about and nurtured in a more holistic way rather than that very simplistic way. But anyway, that's all I'd like to say for now.
I think that's where the role of fathers is so important, and the role of, you know, all role models that are there in a boy's life. You know, it's very much an attitude of, well, boys will be boys, in the way in which they interact with young women, or girls. It's even when we were talking about the, you know, there's still that narrative, well, if a boy is horrible to you, it's because he likes you, and girls are sort of still taught those kind of things right back from in the playground. You know, if he pulls your hair or something like that, or he teases you, you know, and or talks to you disrespectfully, it's because he likes you. I'm surprised that this is still coming up, but I'm still hearing people say those kind of things. And you know, there is the way in which we see certain type of behavior, even if we look at, for example, sentences that are given for things like rape. You see this a lot in the States when they talk about campus rape, for example, at universities, that boys are given, or young men are given, suspended sentences, for example, in terms of how, you know, because of their future, we don't want to spoil their future and what kind of things they might do in the future. It's almost like a little bit of a card. You're given a card, a free pass to behave in a certain way. And this whole conversation we're having now, kind of a lot of this came up with the Me Too movement as well, where people started to examine how is it that what message are we sending to our young boys? And I don't think there is enough participation of men in this conversation. And I think the men are the ones that really have the biggest influence on how a male turns out as an adult, really. And it needs to start from the time they're very young, nurturing a positive attitude towards women, and, you know, in terms of how they see them, how the language they use. But I do think, Hester, like you say, porn is almost very much counteracts all of that kind of thing. And it's something that has to trickle down all the way from families to society to media, to the justice system, on all different levels. This needs to be tackled, and it can't be just said, well, let's just have women change their behaviour and it will go away. That's like the same sort of conversation we have about racism. Oh, if you stop talking about it, it will go away. And you know, this needs to be a whole societal approach.
I'm thinking a lot about the system using natural attributes to entice men and women in certain behaviours. I'm thinking about that show that you mentioned, that your friend mentioned from Italy. And I'm actually now being brought back to when I was a child and when I used to watch Benny Hill. If anyone remembers Benny Hill, he used to use that same type of titillation. The girls would run around and it was just all a game. It was a game. And when I look back, just in that little bit that you said, Martin, it has opened up so many different memories. And I can remember not just Benny Hill, but so many different shows where women were paraded. And when in that being paraded, I can only imagine that they were made to feel how much of an honor it was, you know, to be desired by so many different people. So it's probably massaging the ego in a sense of the woman wanting to feel wanted and the man being entertained, and then it effect being shown to the masses, and it's just unleashed. And I feel like the lack of accountability of us being able to just look at ourselves and realize that, you know, everyone is someone's daughter, son, aunt, mother, so to speak, you know, that respect is just not there. But I don't think there's a space to some extent for it to be learned, especially where there's so many different things contended. Yes, Kenny Everett. Sorry, who just wrote that? I remember the big booed caricature of a woman. That's it. And him looking, oh, yeah, she's a bit of all right. Sorry, another memory coming back to mind. And it was all a joke. So if you as a woman would complain, there must be something wrong with you. This is more of a reflection of my thoughts, everyone. This is not so much commentary. It's just the learning. Where there is so much for us to be aware of. I'm going to stop for a moment.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. There's something about if you're, you know, well, if you're not laughing at yourself, or you're not getting the joke, like there's something wrong with you. We'll laugh at your form, we'll laugh at your body, we'll laugh at your face, we'll laugh at your boobs, we'll laugh at your bum. But if you don't get the joke, the problem's with you. And how, like,
absolutely,
how violent that is.
I remember, sorry, Hester, I went to school in Hainault, and there used to be a game where the boys would go around grabbing the girls' boobs, and literally they would just go up to you and go like this. So I'm not, okay, I don't care. So one boy went to do this to me and I punched him in the face, and then I got in trouble. I remember getting in trouble and being told that I should have called a teacher. And no matter how much I protested that no, that he went to touch me, it was heard. And I was told that that wasn't okay, but the focus was on me hitting him. When really, for me, and I'd actually stand by this now, for me, that's okay. You're not allowed to touch me. So if I choose to then react to what you've done, then why am I the one to be held to ransom? That's more rhetorical, people, and that again is just a memory.
I think hi, it's Madupe. I think for myself, what I've sort of taken away, one of the things I was thinking about is how as a parent am I bringing up my children? Am I bringing them up because of based on their gender? Am I bringing them up in different ways? Am I having different conversations with my son as I'm having with my daughter? And I think, I think one of the things I kind of get slightly concerned about is when everything is expected to be dealt with at school, because I sort of feel like, yes, there's a role in education, but there's also something about just us as human beings, as how we navigate with each other when we step out of our homes, how we speak to each other, whether we're listening to each other. And I think it's just I think what made me sad about some of the things that I'm still hearing young women talking about, the experiences that they're having, that not much has changed from when I was a young lady. So I remember Kenny Everett, and I remember the Benny Hill films and the Carry On films. So, I'm nearly 50, and the things that these young ladies, and my daughter, she's just turned 18. She's going to be going out into the workplace, and it's like, what's changed with, and I think, it's slightly sort of infuriating hearing some of the suggestions that that are coming out from policymakers, talking about they're going to have possibly undercover police officers in bars and things like that. And I think that's not the answer. The answer is about people's behavior, how we interact with each other. And I think one of the things as well, that a lot of violence towards women is committed in the home. So you're not going to have a police officer in everybody's home. So I think we've really got to stop and really look at each other and think about what are we doing, what are we consuming? Because yes, media companies, people want to sell their products, and they'll do that however they can. But we as consumers have to think about, what is it that we're buying into? What is it that is making us buy a particular brand or item, that we're willing to let certain images pass us and not necessarily just question them. So I think I don't know. I'm sort of thinking, what are the answers? What are the solutions? Because everything that's been said is right, but it's slightly, us as human beings, I think there's something within ourselves that I think we've got to sort of sometimes just stop and reflect and think a bit more. I don't know. My thoughts are sort of all over the place at the moment, because I recall when I'd go out clubbing, and it was always this kind of idea that you didn't leave anybody behind, and you made sure you had your keys out your bag ready before you even got to your door, and all these sorts of things that but yet still it's the onus seems to be on women to change, or make sure that they've got to make sure you're a good woman. It's almost like saying that you have to be a good I think there's lots of parallels here with race. Like there's that book, The Good Immigrant. You have to be good. You have to make sure you're wearing a long skirt, and you weren't exposing too much of your body, and you weren't out too late. Well, there comes a point to, well, how late is too late? How long should your skirt be? These aren't the answers. The answers is about how we interact with each other as human beings.
Can I say something else, if possible? I think it's the complexity of it is, and when you mentioned a lot of domestic violence, obviously, is an issue that we need to face. That's where a lot of rapes, murders, child abuse actually occurs amongst people that you actually know. And I think there's something about the kind of dynamic in a family where it can almost be, it can be, the heat can be turned up so much so that at some point it's going to boil over, and it's like a pressure cooker. It's going to burst, because especially I think at a time where there are financial constraints or financial strains, and also when you're living in close proximity with each other, if you haven't got enough space, there's going to be a moment where something is said or something is done that someone's going to snap, and their minds, sometimes they may just at some point wake up and think, oh my God, what have I done? But it can be a case of you being involved in, and I was looking at this thing, a drama triangle, where something is said, could be by anybody, but at the end of the day, the triangle indicates that we all become victims when we're acting these roles out. And if we're not mindful enough in connection with, like Modupe said, on how we speak to each other and how we address each other, which is a real skill. It's something that it's not easy to do, because you have to be highly reflective and mindful as to how you use your words. Buddhists call it right words, don't they? Right mindfulness. And I think a lot of people don't develop that part of themselves where they think, what can I say to that person to make them feel better or make them do the right thing? And I think when there are social pressures, people just lose themselves. You know, they become very animalistic, I think, and very defensive, you know, on both sides, I think.
I also, but I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I also think that some of that also comes down to the conditionings that are put on us in society to react or act in a particular way. And if there is a conditioning that kind of, or a message, an overall society that excuses some of the behavior that, you know, men perpetrate against women, it makes it even easier to cross those boundaries when you do get upset and you are under pressure. But I just wanted to also go back to what Charlotte was saying when you're talking about defending yourself in the prison. Defending yourself at school, which goes back. So I was going to mention something about prison. That's why, yeah. So if you take, for example, I found, because I'm doing a talk on Claire's Law on Monday, and I found some statistics, and they're saying that when women kill a male partner, in 77% of the cases, there's evidence that the man who they killed had a history of violence, abuse. So that goes back to what you're saying about defending yourself. I mean, obviously, it's never right for anyone to kill anyone, but it's not, you know, that it's a lot of the people that are in that situation. It hasn't just come from nowhere. It's come from, you know, sort of the circumstances that they've been in. And I'm going to be just very frank, you know, and come out and say that, you know, when I was in those situations, it got to a point where, you know, I was in a life or death situation, and it could easily have gone the other way just in order for me to defend myself. And there was something else that Dupe made reference to, and you talked about domestic violence. There's a couple of other things that I think was, yeah, so they were saying that, so according to the Office of National Statistics, something like 62% of dead women, they're killed by their partner or ex-partner. But then if you then look at the number of women who are killed in their homes, so a lot of it, obviously majority of it is their partner, ex-partner. So 82% of it, I think it's 82%, 81% of it is the partner or ex-partner of the women killed in their homes. But the rest of it is also people like your husband, your brother, your uncle, and I mean, I haven't actually investigated it, but what really shocked me as well is elderly women as well. A lot of that is not even properly investigated at all. You know, it's somehow excused. So there's an issue there as well. But it is, when you know, look at the amount of domestic violence that's gone up over the pandemic, and we know it's gone up by something like 50% in terms of how many people are reporting it, and that doesn't include the number of people that are not reporting it. There's, you know, we've really still got a lot of problems in society where people are not, or men are not using the power that they have. I mean, that's one of the things I would say to my boys, and I've said to my boys from the time they were, you know, they started to, you know, 13, 14, they became stronger than I was. And, you know, some of the behavior they exhibited, they started to almost exhibit aggressive behavior similar to their father. And it's like, I had to keep on schooling them on the fact that you have more power, you are more powerful, your voice is more powerful. Even you can use your voice in a way that is intimidating to a woman without you intending to, without you realizing it. And it's about teaching them about the level of power they have, both in their voice and their attitude and their physicality. And then if you add on top of that the fact that they're Black as well, you know, you've got an added criteria where somebody else might, you know, feel fear, especially if it's a white woman, then feel fear. So it's almost like you have to train and teach them how they use their voices, how they use their body language. And that's something that, rightly or wrongly, you know, this is something that is the reality of what's going on at the moment.
Could I say
go
one
ahead.
thing in relation to what you just said, Leela, in terms of male, if you like, prowess and the way they express themselves. I think there's a naturality to that. I think the problem is that a lot of males don't have an avenue within which to push it. That in schools, I see it all the time, males are told to sit down and just behave like females. And largely, I would say that males need that more bombastic energy push out. That's why you have a lot of males, and you'll find statistically, a lot of them are ADHD. A lot of them are given Ritalin, and they're dosed with it to make them more docile, because it dumbs them down. If males could box or play more football, sports before, after school, I think you'd see a lot of modification in their behavior. I think you really, really would. They're full of energy, but it goes nowhere, and it's got to go somewhere, and maybe it becomes conflictual, which is the danger. And I know you guys would testify, both Hester and Charlotte, that when you exercise, you get that natural high, don't you? That endorphin high. That is your natural chemical that calms you down. I know I run all the time, and I know that before I go for a run, I'm a bit stressed, a bit anxious. After that run finishes, I'm coming back. I'm a different person, totally different. The whole world can be coming at me. I can deal with it. But before that, I'm on a bit tenterhook. I'm a bit on edge. So there needs to be an avenue for boys to push it out, and also to learn. Actually, sometimes to be angry is not a bad thing, but it depends on how you deal with it. Is your emotional intelligence in place to recognize the root of that anger, which is a psychological thing as well, isn't it? So again, it goes back to the teaching by males and females. So yeah, I think there's something that sometimes modifying that behavior for males to fit into something that is not of their nature is a bit. I think it's disingenuous. It's not giving them. It's like in schools as well, when males are reading certain books, they say males don't like to read because the books they're reading aren't suited to males. Give them a book that they'll enjoy, an adventure or pirates or climbing a Mount Everest or whatever. There needs to be more male oriented stuff or oriented stuff in education. It is quite female centric. And that's one issue some people forward. That's why I just wanted to say that. That's all.
No, I definitely agree with you, because I've had this argument in schools many times where you have to let the boys, especially, they need to go out and play. They need to be allowed to run around. There's too much kind of monitoring of whether they should touch each other. And I know in one of the schools my son went to, there was no contact. They weren't even allowed to touch each other, which I think is complete nonsense. And by taking away all of these things, all you're doing is when they come back in the classroom, as you rightly say, they haven't let go of that energy. And they need to do that. And the same thing, I noticed the same thing whenever I've taught history and I've taught about warfare and weapons and all that sort of thing. The boys are just all up for it. They love it. And then that's where the girls kind of sit back and, so they're exactly what you're saying. We have to sort of balance out the education so that it suits boys and girls. Not, I agree, it is very female centric at the moment. But then that's also, I think you need to have more men in education. I think women have thrived in education, because it offers the childcare options of, if you have your own children, it's got that flexibility. Whereas, for a lot of women, they always have to think about your childcare, don't they? It's always been, from the time women were not allowed to go out and work, that has been the acceptable profession, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So women have always kind of taken on that kind of nurturing role, but I think having more men, and the successful schools I've seen, they do have more men in, and they do sort of balance things out in terms of what they provide for the kids. So yeah, I think that having the good role models as well about how to be, what is a good example of being a man, like I said at the beginning, I think that's really important as well. And like you say, how to have that emotional intelligence and bring out that anger or expression in a healthy way, rather than then take it out on the people that are your closest or your dearest or whoever it happens to be. I think there's a lot of that needs to take place there as well.
Yeah.
I want to I want to go back to something that was said a second ago, but just what's been talked about, I'm slightly worried that we are allowing the stereotypes to sort of like be unchallenged as well. I mean, I've got sons and a daughter. By the way, my daughter won't wear girls' clothes, will only wear boys' clothes. She also gets upset if she's seen as not strong, not sporty, you know, bookish, all of this. And I feel like if we're not careful of challenging the stereotypes that we put both girls and boys into, because they're individuals, aren't they? Yes, they have different hormones, but they're also individuals. Then we're like just missing something. But I don't know. I haven't explored that very well. I'm sorry. I just wanted to go back to the elder women. There's this. I've just shared it with you. Women over 60 are almost twice as likely to be killed by their son as they are by a stranger. As well as partners, they are targeted in their own homes by men they do not know, maintenance men, taxi drivers, robbers, and sexual predators. And this is from the femicide census of the UK. And they're saying the problem is there's just not enough data really for UK and Europe. And this census is from like 2009 up to 2018. And it says, like, I think you've already said it actually, Leela. Well, it says a woman is killed by a man every 3 days on average in the UK. 60, so it's one death every 3 days, a man killing a woman. 62% of all women killed by men were killed. So that was 888 out of 1,425 women were killed by a current or former partner. Over 34% of women killed had children under the age of 18, and a history of abuse or domestic abuse was known in 60% of 1,042 femicides committed by the current or former partners or male relatives. So I think it's exactly what you were just saying, Leela. And I mean, women aren't seen as equal to men, and we can't have those messages like, oh, you're like a girl, you throw like a girl, or you whatever, like it's a derogatory thing to be like a girl.
Could I say one thing, Esther? I'm sorry to cut in, but I know I've read it before, and I saw this documentary called Shame, Violence, Intervention, and it was about a guy who worked in a prison who was dealing with the most violent male prisoners, and the root of their violence was a shame that they held onto, based on the fact for most of them they had no relationship with their father, or they weren't loved adequately. And it's said that the thing that most males don't like, that will cause them most embarrassment, is when they're shamed in public, when they're outed in public in a very negative way. And I think oftentimes, again, when we're looking at the root of violence towards males themselves and towards females, I think possibly, especially in today's society where the traditional route for males in terms of expressing who they are as males is lost. Certain industries have died, they're gone. And a lot more males are alcoholic, drug takers in a lot of regions in this country. A lot of males are committing suicide, taking their lives. And a lot of males, obviously, as you just stated, are being violent towards people they either live with as females or they know. So there's a case here for what issues in society are causing these males to act in that particular way. And I think there isn't a real place for men right now, not in the way that they've been scripted from before, and not in the way that those popular images on TV often showing how those great men that women kind of look at possibly and think, oh, what a man. Those men can't live up to that. Those men are on a pedestal. So it kind of weakens their position, which is a form of embarrassment. It's a form of shame. They don't love themselves because they're not real men then. They're not a man's man. And I would testify that that is a part of the issue where men don't know where to fit themselves now. In fact, in the future, and I've just watched the documentary, I actually was teaching population with some of the students, and the future is that the jobs that are available are suited more to female in the tertiary sector, the quaternary sector. More women are going to university now than men. So those more educated people are the females. The future is female. So where do men go? Is it the gambling? Is it the drinking? Is it the drug taking? Is it the violence? And something needs to be done, I think, to make men reshape themselves, to think they're worth more than just a monetary income, than just a career, than just a status. They have a spiritual entity that is worth, that is everything. It's more than the material. But they're not being given that story. And I think that's a major part of what you just read in terms of why that data is there. We need to connect with men more. And I did say to you before that Kevin and myself, we want to go into prisons. I'd love to go in there and connect with those guys, because I think we've got a lot to teach them on how to be more holistic. You can be, you can have a physical aspect, but you can also have that soft kind of loving aspect, and balance yourself and love yourself, So anyway, I just wanted to say that, because I think reading the statistics is real, it's factual, but there's got to be a reason why people respond in that way. People aren't, I don't think they're naturally like that. There's something in society that's causing them to feel they need to express themselves in that terrible way. And it's awful.
Yeah, Charlotte, thank you so much, Martin.
Sorry. Okay.
You took my breath
Sorry,
away.
I think Dupe's twice wanted to speak.
I'm so sorry.
No, go for it.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I hear what's being said, and I sort of think, oh, but the situation we're dealing with is now, and the reality is that in most positions of power, it's men who are in those roles. So, I accept that. I think I'd agree that there's a change in society in the types of jobs that are available, and I think it goes to something that Esther was talking about. We have to be careful when we're talking about genders and what kind of roles we're assigning to different people. We can't just assume that because you're a girl, you're going to like the color pink, you're going to want to play with dolls. Within the spectrum of being a young person growing up, you might find that there are things which girls want to do, which would be typically, or 50 years ago, we would say that those are the kind of thing that boys do. So I think we have to be very conscious as well about the language that we're using, and think about how we assign roles and different characteristics to different people. But I think there's still something very much about the modelling that we see in society now. So, for example, if we think about, I don't know, I can give an example like Prime Minister's question, and you look into that chamber, these are the people who are elected to represent us. And at most times when I'm sitting there watching Prime Minister's question, it's fairly embarrassing when you sort of see the way people are shouting across each other. Majority of them in that chamber are men. So, I still think there's something about how, I think we've got a long way in terms of having sort of equality and equity for women in lots of roles across society. That being said, it doesn't, I don't want it to be a man v women type of discussion, but I still think there's something about, where does the power actually lie at the moment? Most legislators are men, most of our judges are men, most of our politicians in the serious parts of government are men. Back to when Theresa May was Prime Minister, I still recall them having discussions about what kind of shoes she was wearing. When we see presidents of America, or people, there still seems to be a focus on what they're wearing. And and I look to a country like New Zealand, where their leader, she's shown to me that you don't necessarily have to have the skills which people might associate more with a man. You don't need to have that to be a leader. So I still think there's, I think diversity is important, but I think as well that we need to think about how I still come to this kind of human thing about how we look at each other and how we interact with each other, regardless of whether you're a man and a woman. And I'm kind of worried that I don't want women to be scared of all men, because not all men are act in a predatory type of way. But I think there's something very much, and I think there's parallels here with some of the discussions in race, that we need more men to call out bad behaviour from other men. I think that has to happen more and more. And you'd see it happening, but it has to happen more.
Should we go to Charlotte? Thank you so much, Madupe.
That was perfect. So I think about the attributes within a man and a woman, and I think about what society focuses on. So for men, they focus on the power aspect, and for women, it's like the sexuality, oh, look amazing, look pretty type of thing, right? So they pull out one attribute as if that is the attribute. So if you maybe are not that strong, maybe you feel you're not that strong in the attribute, you think, well, what do I have to offer? What do I have to offer? This is all that's focused on. This is all that's focused on. Again, I believe it's part of the massive plan to make us not feel whole and to look outside to get something to make us whole. Like personally, for me, I love male and female energy. I love the difference in it because it brings so much. It's just so unique on either side. It's not a question of what's better or what's worse. No, it all needs to be honed and nurtured. But it's about us allowing it to be okay to do that, because quite frankly, for what I've observed is that we're not encouraged to do that. We're encouraged to stay on the grind, which is to do tick all these boxes to then be acceptable. Then you tick all the boxes and you're never feeling acceptable. So then you're chasing again. So you're constantly just living unfulfilled. And one of the things that was said earlier on about the male energy. So I used to teach in Prus, and I did that for like 4 years. And one of the things that I did, so I taught art, technology and PE. So one of the things that I lobbied for was for PE to be first. PE had to be first because for me, when you saw all the kids run in, all they wanted to do was run in, scream and shout. So we were following the curriculum for so long, and we'd be having these massive team meetings about what do we do? How do we make it more? How do we make it easier? Now I don't know how long it took me for them to take me seriously. When they finally took me seriously and they put PE first. So it was PE and meditation. Martin, you said something about spirituality, right? Oh my goodness. These young gentlemen changed before my very eyes. We would do football. Don't even ask me how I knew how to do it, but we would do a football session and, lots of different training. And they loved the meditation. Oh, miss, can we lay down, miss? Can we be still now, miss? Can we listen? So it was, they wanted to be able to get rid of that energy. Then they wanted to connect with what was greater within them. And then after that, they walk along to maths and English. For me and the teachers, we all agreed that these children, we was like, what are they doing here? What are they doing here? For us, it was more of an acknowledgement that the system that has been created does not fit. It doesn't fit. So we can sit here and try and discuss, all the different things that are very, very important. But at the end of the day, for me, I believe you take it back to the root. So if we take it back to the root, especially for the next generation, obviously, because a lot of us are a product of situations that we had no control over. And I will also include the men in that. Being on both sides of the spectrum as a woman, I say that wholeheartedly, because a lot of men who choose to act out of violence, that I'm only speaking about the ones that I know that have come into my life and that I am aware of. When you allow yourself to hear their story, it's actually not that different from a lot of the women. If you can allow yourself to listen without prejudice and without thinking, oh, but he's a man, he should be stronger, you know, more restrained. I mean, why should they automatically have that? I don't get it. I don't get it. But at the same time, we are not encouraged to spend time nurturing that with our young men, with our young brothers, with our sons. Not everyone is like us in the room, you know, not everyone understands the importance of that, like what Leela was saying earlier about talking to the boys and having conversations and making them aware. Like, not everybody would even think about doing that. They're just constantly coming from a point of, you should know, or no, they shouldn't know, the same way our girls shouldn't know. We need to allow our children to develop in truth, which is, you know, loving every aspect of their diversity, from their strength, from their fluidity, whatever it is. It's all good and it's all okay. And it does start at home. The system is in place for a reason. It's in place for a reason. Exhale.
Yeah, definitely in place for a reason. The power structure of the white, male, privileged person, you know, the elite, that, you know, that system is there to keep everybody, men and women, uniting, keep everybody from seeing what's really going on. You hit the nail right on the head there, Charlotte.
I feel like.
Oh, and Martin was trying to talk.
Oh,
I think,
sorry, Martin.
No, I'm hearing what you're saying, Charlotte, and I think that is what I was expressing. Exactly what I was expressing, because I know there's a need for young men to feel connected in many different aspects of who they are. I used to run a boxing club in one of the schools I was in, and it was a really profound experience for me, because when they would come, a lot of these boys, they were considered to be slightly wayward around the school. But when they would come in that space, they felt safe because I was there and I would join in with them.
Yes.
And then when I would see them outside of that context of the boxing,
yes,
the respect they gave me in the corridor, you could see it. It was different. They would listen to me. Yeah. But what you found and what you said about the system is that when the school SLT members caught wind of the connection I was having with the students because of it, they told me I had to stop the boxing club. They told me I had to stop it because they didn't like this relationship I was developing with them, because they would probably listen to me more than they would listen to them. So the power struggle that's there, yeah, is quite I would say a sociopathic, psychopathic one, where they're not looking outside of their own egos to look at the wider community. Yeah.
Well, Martin, you came in and disrupted the system. How dare you?
Come on.
How dare you, Martin?
I'm too up.
A strong black man who's speaking with such grace.
Come on.
You know, and showing love. How dare you, Martin? You broke it. You broke the system.
Well,
and that's this. Sorry.
I'm going to say one more thing. That documentary, I would suggest it. The shame, violence, intervention one. That's very profound. That's the thing that got me thinking about the male issues, because those violent guys, the way they connected with that guy was marvelous. They connected so much so that they responded by not wanting to be violent anymore because they found their core issue. But the prison, they saw that, oh my God, this is working. Guess what they told him? We don't want your program here anymore. Yeah. They said there's no more funding. He said, I'll do it for free. Said, nah, we don't want it, because that means the clients aren't going to come in anymore. Yeah.
No more free labor.
Come on.
I can't with this. It's for me, it's so plain sight. I can't believe it. Like I get very frustrated. We did this system in the Peru for a couple of years and it worked, and then they wanted to change the curriculum, and as soon as, similar to what you said, Martin, similar, it wasn't it's really important to make sure that the children do their maths and their English first. They can't do it. They can't do that first. So you want them to fail. Oh, so you want them here. Oh, yeah, because you get a lot of funding. I remember actually saying that in a meeting, and they, I just can't. I can't do it. Our young men are too important, and they're too important, and they're allowed to manifest into that state. Because it doesn't just come. It's something. There's something, and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And especially if we live on English soil, we're meant to be the all enlightened ones, right? No, it's a lie. It's a lie. It's a system, and I'm not buying it anymore. And it sometimes I think we try to look for answers when it's really, really clear.
You've both jogged memories in me, which I just want to share, about teaching dance to boys in schools. And there's something about giving that one-on-one focus, that encouragement, seeing them achieve, seeing them get created, seeing them make something that they're proud of. And you know what you're saying, Martin, about how the boys were relating to you afterwards and like in the halls. And I'm a parent at the school that was teaching after school, and prior to that, teaching in other school situations and blah, blah, blah. And there's something really sacred about that look of recognition and thanks. Something really beautiful, especially from the boys. And there was this one boy, and for his year 6 play, they were doing Aladdin. And I taught 4 kids to do something. They wanted to dance while someone was singing the Magic Carpet song. I can't remember what that was, right? There was 2 girls and they were doing something with the ribbon. Hi, Sheridan, by the way. Anyway, I taught the boys this routine, which was a little bit like capoeira, but it was really slow. It was a bit adagio. It was quite slow. It was controlled, and it's quite difficult to do. Anyway, they smashed it. It was brilliant. And those 2 boys were so proud of themselves. They'd never been asked to do anything like that before. And that one boy, and I used to see him around Deptford in the parks, and whenever I saw him, he'd be like, hi, miss. And he would just act so tough the rest of the time, because I remember he started secondary school and he would still talk to me and be like, how's it going in year 7? But whenever he saw me, he'd be like, hi miss. And he would just turn into that moment again that I will always hold so precious, which was, we had that little thing, and I was encouraging, and I saw him get creative, and I saw him be proud of himself. And so thank you. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Martin and Charlotte.
That's beautiful, because you held a mirror. You held a mirror for him to see himself, because you could see him. Imagine how many of us could, if we would allow ourselves to see past what they say is written off. Oh my gosh. Who writes off kids? I know, like, adults, look, but we need to start at the root. The adults we have to deal with. We do. Well done, Hester. That was beautiful. Sorry, I'm going to keep quiet now.
Yeah, Leela's bringing us back. We've all gone all like into our utopia place, which is nice. It's positive. But Leela's, do you want to say your question, Leela?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that it's a dual role to play. So of course we've got to look at our youth and how we bring up our children and how the schools, kind of cater for them, and youth clubs and all the rest of it. But also, they're at the same time we're dealing with that. How are we dealing with what's going on with the femicide that's happening in the country now? Protecting women, domestic violence, how are we dealing with all of that? And I do think that the courts have a role to play in this. So as well as attitudes and people changing attitudes, I think that there definitely has to be deterrence in place. I mean, I had this conversation with someone earlier today, and I think that there are people, no matter what you try and do on a level in terms of how they might be changed inside, there are some people that really not that interested in changing, or they're too far gone because they've already been had those attitudes for too long, and they respond to deterrence more than anything else. So there has to be, in my opinion, deterrence within the system. I mean, if we just look at rape cases, for example, they've drastically gone down so much. Where's the deterrent? There isn't really a deterrent there at all. Domestic violence, how many people feel they can come forward? Not many. And then how many cases are taken forward? There's a lot of work to be done in the judicial system to make it a deterrent, and that could possibly, maybe not much, but it could possibly be that deterrent for other people. Who knows? It's hopeful.
I was just saying, I think we've got to talk about it. I didn't put it in chat. And I think coming forward about domestic abuse, and there's something about, like, I'd love to know what you will think, but somehow, it will get focused on the woman. Like, why did you stay? Why didn't you do something about it? Why did you put up with that kind of behavior? Like we was talking before about, as soon as you reach puberty, you're sexualized, and then it's, why are you dressed that way? Why are you showing your body, not showing, but wearing anything at all, figure? I mean, I said to Charlotte today, we were talking about something, and I was like, I get why they cover women up in some places. Like, I was feeling that way today. Yep. I was feeling that way.
Yep. That's a real feeling. It's like, I get it. I'm not here to prove the rights or wrongs of it, because that's not part of the discussion. But when you mentioned that today, Hester, it made a lot of sense, and I felt it, because it seems like that's the only safest way. But obviously, no. But sometimes I look at certain countries and I think, well, I can understand why they do. And then even then, it's like, well, you're literally shielding, you're putting a cloak over people so they don't make you want to go do stuff. I can't. I'm sorry, I'm not laughing because it's not funny, but it's like, I can't. The logic behind it, there is none.
But then also that does a disservice to men, because that's almost like saying, well, men are incapable of controlling themselves. And I know a lot of men that, and I'm sure, Martin, you'd say the same, that's quite offensive, really, to say that is, the default, that men can't control themselves. And I think that there's a lot of, and I would include women in this, there is still quite a lot of prejudice out there. Well, prejudice is maybe too strong a word. There's still quite a lot of misconceptions about domestic violence. And sometimes women can be the biggest judges. I mean, I have to say, in my experiences, talking about things I've gone through, the biggest people that have cast judgment on me are women, other women. In terms of, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay in that situation? Is calling the police, was it really the right thing to do? So, there's also you know, when you look at cases in terms of trauma and domestic violence and rape and all that, there's a lot of public they don't know. There's a lot of people don't understand the law, for starters. And again, if you understand the law properly and how it works, it could provide a deterrent, and it could provide a lot of women with, you know, speaking up, or make them want to speak up if you know what is what. But also, you know, unfortunately, if you end up in court, those same people that have those misconceptions are the ones that sit on our juries. You know, the whole system, there's an issue there. You know, do they have the knowledge necessary? Should they even be sitting on juries if they don't understand trauma and rape and domestic violence and all these sorts of things? So there's a, you know, I do think the general public, you know, of course, we have to have healthy relationships taught in schools and things like that. But there's something to be said about the messages sent out to the general public and educating people. I don't really see, you know, we have a lot of programs and documentaries on a lot of things. I haven't actually, maybe someone else has seen it. I've never seen really programs that educate the public on domestic violence and why it happens, and you know, why women stay in those situations for so long, or you know, what is the psychology of fear and all the rest of it. I think we need to do some work on that as well, so that people can be more supportive of women in these situations and looking out for the signs, maybe if it's your neighbour, your family member, or things like that, and in order to support. And then there's also the cases of looking at funding. It's interesting that Priti Patel, she's come up with, oh, you know, we're going to provide money for refugees and things like that. Well, they're the same government that cut all of these services for the last, 11 years. So, yeah, there's a lot of issues there that need to be tackled.
I think, could I also say, Leela, I think, and I know, because when I've studied sociology in the past, there are some men actually who are on the receiving end of physical violence domestically from their partner. They may be in the minority, but we don't know. There might be a hidden kind of statistic where those men, again, because if they were to come forward and say, I've been abused by my female partner, they might again be seen to be the weaker sex, which traditionally again goes back to the idea I can't be seen that way. So there's a lot to be said for domestic violence. It can occur both ways. And I watched a documentary where some females were actually asked, were you violent? And they were like, yeah, it's almost my right to be violent towards him. And glorying in it like it was almost a good thing. So I don't think there's a fixed direction. I think it can go both ways, but I think it's about, as we said earlier, it's about curing the human issue. There's some trauma there. There's some, you know, there's some real deep rooted scripting going on where they've observed it and they think they need to respond in that way because they think it's normal. It's a normalized reaction, isn't it, to situations? And I think we need to break that by just challenging these social constructs that are thrown at us all the time about how we behave. You know, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of reflection, a lot of work, a lot of therapy, I think. You know, it's not easy.
Can you say something about that, Martin? Like, because men, I think they find it harder, right, to go to therapy or ask for help.
Well, yeah, the majority of people that go to therapy are female. I think something like 90% of all people that go to therapy are female, which indicates that females want to talk and get rid of, if not get rid of per se, but acknowledge the emotions that they're going through. Men, on the other hand, are not encouraged to talk. They're often stifled and told that isn't something men do. Me, myself, personally, I go to therapy every Wednesday. I got a therapist I go and see every Wednesday. And I talk to him, and it is a male, about the way I feel about what's been happening in my life for the past week, the past year, the past 10 years, the past 40, 50 years in my life. And since I've been going, I've actually felt a lot better about who I am. I've almost, if you like, for want of a better phrase, met myself. I've almost gone full circle, I feel, and been able to face myself and acknowledge the things I thought I maybe should be embarrassed about I don't have to be, because that's just part of my journey. So if you come to that agreement via therapy, in whichever type you go for, that you're okay. You're not going to be perfect. You're just trying your best, and you've got a long way to go in your life. Then you won't feel as angry and frustrated, and you won't want to act out in a violent way anymore. You won't want to do that. You won't want to do that. So yeah, that's it's important. Men need a space to talk. Men need to talk. We need to open up. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
Charlotte's like, can we just clone you, please?
The world would be a boring place, Charlotte. 3.5 billions of Martin is just not a good thing.
No, that's great. We'll take it. Thanks. Second that. I mean it.
You make me laugh, Charlotte. Made me laugh.
Good. I mean it.
That's true. I think we're coming to like our last sort of 5 minutes ish. Sorry, I never am very good at keeping a track of the time. And we haven't heard Madupi from you for a little while. Do you want to share what you're thinking right now?
Yes. So coming back to the question that Leila had asked, I think it's really sad to see that the numbers in terms of the prosecutions of rapes have gone down. So I think there are lots of practical things that can be done to change that. I think we need to make victims of that type of crime, be they women or men, but in a majority they are women and young girls, feel that it's okay to come forward, that they will be listened to. So whether that means that I'm not, I know resourcing is definitely an issue, but I still think there's something about, we know that in some places, some police forces seem to be getting that they're doing that in a better way. So I think there's definitely something about how places that are doing good jobs should be sharing that and encouraging others to do that. I think also, I think it's something, I definitely, why are we always blaming the victims? I think, again, that's something that we all need to perhaps think about and reflect on ourselves. And I think, holding people in power to account for what they're doing. It's very well having a further review into things and holding consultations and questions that have previously been asked, but we need to see some action now, definitely.
Absolutely, too much words. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to also say,
Agreed.
that there is when we look at things like domestic violence, a lot of Black and ethnic minority groups really, really underreport. So they don't come up in the ONS stats and things like that, but they do come up in research that's done into charities. And there needs to be looked at in terms of, well, why is it that, and we know the reasons why do the people not feel that they can go to the authorities to get these things, dealt with by the police? Why can they not do that? Obviously, we know racism, disadvantages, prejudice, all those sorts of things play a role in that. So I think that's something, hopefully, that we can have a chat about on another occasion. We didn't get a chance to get to it, but that's definitely something that's an important issue as well.
Maybe we need to follow on next week. Just something to think about, Do you know what I do want to ask? And I think, Leila, you're the one to ask. What do you recommend? So let's say that as a neighbour or something, you overhear something going on next door and it's not okay. How would you recommend, or what do you think would be the best port of call?
I've been in this situation so many times. I can't even tell you how many times I've called the police on my neighbours, because I've been in this property for over 20 years. I've had quite a lot of different neighbours, and I've seen, but the problem is you can only do your bit. I mean, I think the worst one I came across was the guy upstairs who lived there for 7 years. So it was awkward because he and I used to chat, But at the same time, you know, there came a point, and one of this is the second girlfriend now that I had to call the police on. One of the girlfriends, she was on the stairs with him out in the communal corridor, and he was just about to hit her, and I'd heard the commotion upstairs. I went out into the corridor, and I just stood at the top of the stairs, I mean at the bottom of the stairs, and because he'd seen me there, he couldn't hit her. So he let her go, let her wrist go, and she ran down the stairs. And I left it at that. And he was like, oh, why'd you let her go? Blah, blah, blah. And then the other time with another girlfriend, I called the police, and my son also saw her, and she had, because it went really silent, and she's got a massive mouth. You could hear her all the time. So when it went silent, that's a sign something's, you know, what's going on. And I didn't hear anything. And it turns out he'd been strangling her, and she had all the marks. My son's seen all the marks around her neck. And me and my daughter had both heard it, and we called the police. But then you can only do your bit, because it went to the point where they say, oh, if you wanted to, we called you to come to trial, would you come to trial? And she'd gone quite a long way in the process. And then after a while, they got back together again. I mean, they split up about a year after that, but you can't do anything about that. You've done your bit, and it's as heartbreaking as it is. At least I know I've done that. I've done it. And I know for my own self, having been through all of this, is that you've got to be at a point where you're ready to leave. If you're not at that point, no matter what anyone else says to you, and then we all have a little bit of an interest in keeping it a secret as well. I was the best actress in the world, but you've got to be at that point, not only when you want to leave, but you have the means, the physical means, the financial means to get out of that situation. Or in my case, I called the police because it became life or death, and all the kind of excuses have been taken away from me by that point in terms of my kids and stuff like that. So and I had other agencies behind me supporting me, but it took me a long time to get to that point of being able to do it. And so there's a lot of things need to be in place for that woman to get to that point to be able to leave or call the police or whatever means she's using. So, and that comes with support. A lot of support needs to take place from, other people. Wouldn't have been able to do what I did if it wasn't for other people supporting me. Thanks, Dupe, by the way, one of them. Remember that day? It took me 4 hours to get to the police station, which is 20 minutes down the road, and I called you.
I wish I could have done more.
No, but that's the kind of thing. Friends need to, step up if they can and help, but just be there, and family. But I never saw my family. So, that's all I can say to answer that question, Charlotte.
There's no answer, but we do have to be aware, like what you said. What you said, I think, was perfect. We do have to be vigilant. It's not our job to make sure what the next step is for that person, but you can't ignore it. Well, for me, you can't ignore it, because I always feel like, how would I feel if I did and then I found out? So when I've been in situations when I've seen acts of violence or I've heard it, we need to be together. Everything that they have taught us, we need to unlearn. We're better together. We need each other. We need to support one another. I guess it is just being vigilant. And if in doubt, say something.
I think, Charlotte, you said again something very, very important, is that this constant rhetoric that's forwarded that male, female, black, white, whatever made black, you're better off individually. And that's almost been like a repetitive mantra over the past 40 years or so in this capitalist system, because I think they use it as a divide and conquer kind of thing.
Yes.
Yes. The family, when you think about it, it's the last bastion of support in our society, really. We have no more trade unions, jobs are gone. The welfare state is being eroded, NHS is being sold off, the list goes on. So gradually, the only people you can really turn to are your blood and even your sort of just slightly wider community, your network. But if that's not there, if you're individualized, you're in real problems. You're going to develop all these issues that you're going to have no one to turn to.
Mm,
I think I agree. I agree. We're better off together than apart.
it's true.
No.
If in doubt, scream out, like literally just say it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we've got to wrap up. I feel like there were so many things we didn't even get to yet.
Will we ever get there? Questions pending. I think so.
Maybe we could just have like a final couple of words, and then I'm not gonna end the call, but I'm just gonna, then I'll stop the live. So yeah, Leela.
Gosh, there's so much to say. What can I say? I think coming back to the same point as before, it has to be multi-pronged approach where we are tackling from the youth all the way up to what's going on with adults today. There needs to be, it's never going to be one solution solves all. It's got to be a sort of holistic approach. And but I do think there's something to be said about blaming the victim. This is, to me, it's gaslighting. It's a way of deflecting things back. And I think someone put it in the chat as well, where we deflect back onto the person who's saying it. Is that really what happened? You sure that's what happened? Maybe you were doing this, or maybe you did this, or maybe it was, somehow your fault. And I think that people who have experienced those things, they need to be listened to a lot more. And it can be the closest, nearest, dearest who gaslight you and ask those questions, or it can be your church, or it can be your, whatever community that you are in, or that don't support you. It could be your workplace if you need time off, that don't support you. So there needs to be a lot more, I think, support for people who've been through all of this. And that goes through the whole process in terms of whether they're getting out, whether they're going through the judicial system, the whole spectrum really, whether it's housing, therapy, whatever, all of those things. There needs to be much better support when it comes to all of these issues.
What do you pay?
Yeah, I mean, echoing what Leela's just said, I think I'd say if there's anyone that's listening, or is going to listen to this chat later, if you find yourself that you are in this position, and I'd say the first thing is to tell someone that you trust. You need to, you need to tell someone what is going on. And I think once you've said it once, then it becomes easier to tell other people and not hold it in, because I think that's the first thing. It's not acceptable for anybody to do that to somebody else, regardless of the relationship, how long you've known them. It's not always traditionally people in a sort of in a relationship. It can be relatives. The way that we live now is changing, so it's not acceptable for anyone to do that to anybody in any way. There is help out there. I mean, I'm just thinking that if you've triggered anybody, please share and seek the support. You're not alone. I definitely say that you're not alone, and it's important to I think there's an onus on all of us not to accept the sort of typical politician response that we have to prioritize. The money's there. It's not an either or situation. We can do this and other things as well. So, I think, when people sort of say that there's not enough money, we know that there is enough money, because we've seen how much money is being pulled out of nowhere over the last year. So there is enough money. It's just about whether there's a will and commitment to change what's going on. And I think we just have to hold those in power to account. We have to write to our MPs. We've got to keep writing to our councillors. We've just got to keep on talking about it and not letting people shirk that responsibility, Yeah, that's what I've got to say now. There's more to say, and I'm really, there's a lot more. The discussion just seems like we've just started, so. But that's my sort of immediate thoughts coming to.
It's only just started, but we're all responsible. We're all responsible. What are we all doing? It'd be good to sort of make it like a pledge, wouldn't it? Like, what am I going to do? I'll go to Charlotte next. Just sort of final thoughts or feelings.
Final thoughts and feelings. Speak up. Allow yourself to have your moment with someone that you trust. And talking to someone that you trust doesn't always mean that you really know them very well. You don't have to keep a secret. You don't have to keep things in the family. You don't have to put a cloak over things, because half of the time, this is what abusers want you to do. They want you to put a cloak over it. They want you to keep it a secret. I've walked that road, and I believe wholeheartedly that it is my duty to call it out if I see it. There's signs in your friends that you can see, people. There's little things that your friends will give away without speaking. If you suspect that they're being abused, male or female, I would really encourage you to allow yourself to dig deep into that area. So if you suspect someone is being hurt, talk to them. A lot of them have let a lot of things leak out in their conversation to you because they want you to ask a question. Ask the question. Ask it in love and in a private place, but ask the question. To my brothers and sisters out there that are being abused, there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing that you did to cause that affliction. There's nothing, you couldn't have cooked a better dinner. You couldn't have cleaned up a little bit better. You couldn't have folded the clothes a different way. You couldn't have ironed the shirt a different way. There's nothing. I really want to encourage you to know that you are enough, that you are amazing, that you have a purpose, and that you don't deserve it. Sending love, light, and blessing in this moment to anyone that has watched this today and feels empowered to step out in their truth. Move forward. It's time. You can do it. Thank you for listening to us today.
I'm speechless. I'm going to come to Martin, and then I know Sheridan recently joined us, so we'll hear some final thoughts from Martin, and then it's going to be a high and bye from Sheridan.
I think from today there's been quite a complex series of ideas that have been kind of come together to show that domestic violence is undeniably real, factual. It's something that can really be painful and something that can have long-term effects on people that not only are victims of it, but those who observe it, children, for example. And I remember, and it brought a memory back to me just now, a member of my family, my aunt, in fact, who was very badly beaten by her husband of the time. And I'll never forget actually going down with my mum and my dad to go and see her. And when I saw her eye and her face was blown up, I was shocked, deeply shocked that that happened to my aunt. So I know that kind of behavior is something that is I think it's devilish, for want of a better phrase. But I'm also a person now at my point in life that knows thought and action of a human being it comes from somewhere. It comes from some past events in that person that's afflicting the other individual with that kind of either verbal or physical bullying. They're in pain also. So my kind of mission is to support anyone as much as I can to help them to overcome. If they can reflect on their misgivings, then at least that's a first step to get them getting better. And I think you can never dismiss another human being, no matter who they are. I think everyone is open to reform. And I think, you know, the old Christian adage is, you know, you've got to treat other people the way you'd like to be treated. So if we're going to create a big global community, it's got to start with us helping many aspects of this issue. And it's very complex. It's not easy. But that's what I think anyway. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Russ Martin.
Thank you.
Sharadine.
Hi, I'm so sorry I was late. I had a manic day. It's going to be very, very short. It was just going back to when you were saying, Layla and Charlotte, that, you know, obviously you can speak to somebody who you trust. In my case, when it happened with me, I didn't actually have anybody because I was living with somebody who was outside of London, and I'd moved, like left my family and friends to be with him. And so I didn't really have anybody that I actually made friends with. So in that case, I sort of had to turn to organizations. So I say to anybody, you know, if you don't have anybody that you can speak to, or maybe you feel embarrassed to go, maybe you can organizations, you know, you've got the Samaritans, you've got, I believe even now you've got Boots and Super Drugs, the pharmacy. If you actually go in there and say you need help, help you.
Can we just stop our vids so that Sharadine can have her bit easier internet connection, just so until Sharadine finishes, if we all stop our videos, apart from you, Sharadine. No, we've lost Sharadine.
No, sorry, that was it. Yeah. You? Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Hang on. Oh, did you hear anything I said?
Yeah, you were saying even in Boots and places like that, you can go and
okay, right, yeah, you've got other organizations like the Black Sisters of Southall and places like that. They will actually listen to you and they will help you. So yeah, that was it really.
I think that's what I'm taking with me most right now. Those words. I mean, we started off talking about misogyny. We touched on femicide. There's so much to say. There's so much to talk about that I don't even know most of this stuff. I'm just starting my own little journey with, like, personally with research, and there's so much shame involved from like all the different angles. And what Martin said was so important, and he recommended the film Shame Violence Intervention. And yeah, with children who aren't shown the role modeling or what to do about those big feelings that are just so overwhelming. It's like those feelings feel like they're gonna, you know, destroy you, kill you, and those how do we learn what to do about those feelings when they you know, they come upon us? And there's some women here that have really helped me in the last few days to just begin to sort of speak things that I, you know, wasn't sure how to say. So thank you. It's really late. I'm so sorry. It's already gone past 8 o'clock, and it's whizzed by. And just thank you. I'm going to stop the live. So
Thank you, everyone.